In this episode of Grief in Common, we mention sudden death and heart attacks throughout. Welcome back to the Grief in Common podcast. My name's Angharad, and you may have heard me on season 1. I'm here today with Zunera, and we're going to be talking through all sorts of themes such as sudden loss and milestones. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Zunera. I'm a first year medic at Cambridge, and medicine is pretty much my life right now. But outside of medicine, I cox with my college boat club. So right now I'm midweek through Bumps, which is a Cambridge style of racing. And yeah, that's me.
Nice. I used to row. I used to cox. Yeah, because I
Really?
live in Oxford,
Oh.
so I used to row for them.
Oh, that makes
big
so much
rival.
sense.
Oh, yeah. But no, never once.
Yeah, I just had my first day yesterday.
Oh, nice. No, not an
Yeah.
Oxford uni girl though. Just live here. So I was 14 when my dad died from a sudden heart attack. I'll be 22 this year, so 7 years on. So for me, he missed quite a lot in terms of GCSEs, A-levels, all of those kind of growing up milestones.
Yeah, mine's quite similar. My dad had a heart attack in November 2023 when I was 17. We took him to the hospital, and then he was in ICU for about 2 days before he died. But I think for me, the sudden shock was that my dad was really, really healthy. And he was exercising twice a day. He was doing a new charity thing where he was doing 100 push-ups a day for cancer research because he used to have cancer. So I think to see I don't know about you, but I think in my head your parents are meant to be healthy all the time, and then suddenly see them not healthy is such a shock to the system. And for me, the thought that my dad could die across those 2 days was unbearable, I think, for me.
Yeah. So from what happened to me is I wasn't with my dad. I was actually going on holiday, and I was on a plane when I found out about to take off, and I'd had some strange texts that had given me that gut feeling.
Yeah.
But he was in his 50s, he wasn't meant to die.
Yeah.
And really, really sudden. Went from giving him a hug one day and the next day he's dead. I think that's a massive shock for anyone, but I think especially when we were so young, still in our teens, trying to navigate everything that comes with that. No one and nothing can prepare you, personally. If you are prepared, I'd love to know the tips, because I wasn't.
No, I don't think you ever can be prepared. I think, I don't know, I always had this notion if I knew that he was going to die, I would have been prepared. If I knew that he was going to die from cancer or something. But I think you're never prepared. But then when it comes just in a day, in a moment, that morning that he had the heart attack, he was dropping me off to school. It was such a switch. I think that can sometimes be more disorienting, I think.
Absolutely. The memories of just beforehand and in such sudden events, what was happening for you being driven to school, for me getting dropped off to the airport, I find that really, really crazy. That life can change just so quickly.
Yeah. I think for me though, it also gave me this newfound appreciation for my own life. I think as a kid, I was such a nerd. I was always working, and I think my dad always told me you need to spend more time with your friends and your family. And I think that sudden death that he had made me appreciate every little moment that I have. So now that I'm at uni, yes, I've got to work really hard, but I also go out my way to make sure that I'm making a memory every single day.
Oh, I love that. I think we should take some of that. So I don't know about you, but I think one of the biggest milestones, it sounds like, is going to university. And having that person miss you going. I went to university and then I left after a year. I had a bit of a change of heart. But now I work full-time at a primary school and I'm training to be a primary school teacher. And I think that change and having the confidence to make those changes is something that you wish that person could see, and how much you've grown, and how much your life has changed direction. Originally was a law student, now I'm going to be a primary school teacher, and none of those aspirations were seen. There was no help or guidance from that person, and I think that sometimes plays on my mind quite a lot. I don't know about your journey into university and if you've got something similar.
Yeah, I think mine's quite similar actually. I think university is like my big one, but more so like going to university. My dad died 2 weeks before my Cambridge interview, and I didn't think I'd get in like anywhere. I didn't even think I'd get an interview, and like my dad was the one person who always believed that I could, and so to suddenly stop having that little voice going, you can do this, and like I believe in you. I don't know how I did the interview. I don't know how I got in, but I think like somehow I think I found my strength from him regardless. So I think more than going to uni, it was just like he didn't actually see me get an interview even, I think. But then when I got to uni, I think Freshers Week for me was such a blur that I just like completely forgot that my dad wasn't here to see it. But like now that I'm like midway through the year, like I've experienced so much at uni. I mean, like I've started coxing. I think my dad would have found that so cool. So it's like little things I think in my life now that I'm like, oh, well, my dad would have loved to see that I've done this.
Yeah. A big thing that plays on my mind is future milestones. That will be missed. Things like buying a house, getting married, having children, which are obviously things that not everyone wants. But for me personally, those are. And I find it so difficult knowing that they won't be there. And I often plan, sometimes I sit and I plan what I would do, how I'd keep memories alive. And I love seeing people who have done it, when they keep kind of chairs for their loved ones at weddings and things like that. I find it really comforting.
No, definitely. I think especially when it like happened and it was like early on, so to speak. I think like one of my first couple of thoughts were like, well, he's not going to see me get married. He's not going to like see me have kids. And then I think the kids one for me was like a big blow because I know that my dad would have made like the most amazing granddad. And I feel like in a weird way, I was like, well, my kids, if I have them, are going to miss out on some of the experiences that I had with my own dad. It was odd. But I think that's like a very valid thing, especially like before I was starting university, I was like, well, everyone else's like parents are both driving them up and I've just got like my uncle who's taking me, which I was incredibly grateful for, but it was like seeing everyone's dads on like moving in day.
Yeah, and it's not what you'd imagined for yourself.
Yeah, 100%.
My dad is now technically a granddad. My brother had a baby who's going to turn 2 at the end of this month. And I often look at him and, really, really wish that my dad could have seen him because I just know that he would love him so much. And even actually talking of milestones, watching my nephew hit his milestones of walking and talking and all of those things, I've learned that it's not just mine that he's missing, it's other people's.
Yeah.
And I found that really heartbreaking along the way. And again, I think about how I can keep my dad's memory alive for him.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think like my dad had really, really good close friends, and I always think like, yeah, I'm missing out and it hurts pretty bad, but also there was so much that my dad could have done for his friends that they're now missing out on. And I don't know if they think about it, but like I think it's really hard to phrase this, but it's a shame that the world is missing out on the good that like our dads could have brought.
Absolutely. I really agree. Yeah, my dad worked in palliative care, and yeah, he was a nurse years and years, and he did so much good. And I find it very comforting in a very odd way that people in kind of their last stages of life turn to my dad to be their comfort.
Yeah.
And he's kind of the person that I wish I could turn to for that comfort. But
I don't know if you found this too, but I've always thought like the one person, like if I had to experience grief, the one person who would have gotten me through it is my dad. And it's like somehow, like I feel like your first grief is also weirdly a milestone. and because they're not there, they're missing out on that first milestone, and it's like so much harder because that's one person who could have gotten you through it.
No, absolutely agree. Sometimes if I'm sad about my dad, I want to tell him I'm sad about him. I can't. But no, I definitely feel that same way. I haven't even thought about it like that.
Yeah, I'm always like, well, I feel really sad today about my grief. Who can I tell? My dad. Oh, hold on.
No.
Never mind, can't do that.
Oh, no, you need to go back and listen to Should You Laugh About Grief? Because I think that we do.
Yeah, no, that is definitely my way of coping. I laugh because if I don't laugh, I'll just like cry.
I say that nearly every day.
Yeah. Like, also coming back to the uni point, the friends that I've made at this uni, they're probably going to listen to this, but they are, I don't know how I met them, but it was like somehow the best karma of my life. Like, I love the friends that I've made here so much, and they lift me up every single day. I'm usually sad about my dad at least once a day, and I know that like they're always going to make me laugh. I'm sad that my dad didn't see me like make these friendships in a weird way. I'm not sure if that's a milestone, but for me, it's like a big thing.
Definitely. I think the friends that you meet along the way, and especially ones that get you through different milestones as well. I think it's not just those big milestones that people think of, it's also just the tiny ones. Sometimes waking up and making the bed, that's a really good milestone. Getting through the day without having to go have a little cry, that's a good milestone.
Yeah.
There's loads of tiny ones. I think it's important to remember when we're talking about these things, everyone's goals are different.
Yeah, I think like I know that he's not there to like see my milestones, but like as cringy as it sounds, like every like decision that I make about my life, whenever I do it, I'm like, well, this would make my dad proud. Like again, because I was such a nerd at school, I would never take breaks, but now when I take breaks, that to me is a milestone, and I'm like, well, I've taken some time off and my dad to be proud about that. Or when I started coxing, I was so scared, very, very nervous, like crashed the boat, and I still do sometimes. But I know that my dad would be proud that I'm trying something new. So to me, yeah, like small things are big milestones, regardless.
Absolutely. I find when I finish a book, my dad absolutely loved reading. The house is still covered in books. But I find when I finish one, that's like a little piece of him, because every day we'd have books arriving and he would just read constantly. So I find it really comforting to do something that he loved and I love, even though that tiny little milestone, finishing a book, everything links back in my head. There's always some way that I can, like you said, feel like you're making them proud. And I think they would be proud of us. They would.
100%. Do you think there's stuff that made grief different because it was so sudden?
The thing that I found was not being able to say goodbye and not having an opportunity to make any preparations or anything, just anything along those lines. You know, there were no, this is what I want at my funeral or anything like that. So, because that's my only experience, I find well, I would say it's very linear in my head, but it's absolutely not. Grief is just like one big blob or just about so many spirals in one big blob.
Yeah, I think my thing is like, so when he had his heart attack, we went into the ambulance and then he went in for like an angiogram, and I didn't say anything when he'd gone in because in my head I was like, he's fine. He does this, like he's ill before, he's been ill before and he's like recovered. And then when he was in ICU, he was put into a coma, so I never got like had the chance to say things or do things. And I remember like when he died, they had the conversation. They were like, okay, so he's going to pass away very, very soon, and there's like nothing we can do about it. And I was like, how soon? Like minutes? And they were like, you know, probably like the next 15 minutes. And absolutely panicked. I was like, 15 minutes is all I've got. And it was like the quickest 15 minutes of my life. And I think not being able to say things to him or like give him one last like, I love you, thank you. And I remember like when he was passing away, all I could do was keep saying I'm sorry. But then the nurse said something really important to me, and she was like, your dad knows that you're sorry, but all he needs to hear now is that you love him. And so then that's all I kept doing, and I kept saying I love you. And even then, that didn't feel like enough. Like I wanted more, and it felt greedy. But then again, like similarly on the idea of like you couldn't prepare. Like I didn't know what my dad wanted out of his funeral, and it was like, yeah, I felt quite guilty because I was like, my dad's always done so much for me, but I don't even know what his like last wishes are. And because it was so sudden, I then, because my mum got very, very unwell, so then the next day I started planning his funeral because religiously, it's the idea is that you want to bury them like as quickly as possible for us. So then, like all day in school, I felt like I couldn't grieve because I was so like hell bent on getting this funeral planned and out like done, and I didn't know how he wanted it. I didn't know who to invite, or like it was just mayhem is one way that I can describe it. And I feel like grief itself is so chaotic that to add that into the mix, it was just one big blob of spiral. I think
I found another element of suddenness was after the funeral. And once that was done and everyone had come and said their goodbyes, and then it just feels like the whole world goes back to normal except for yours. And it's not like I'm saying I'd love everyone who came to continue to mourn like me. No, that's absolutely not what I'm saying.
yeah.
But like you get so focused and fixated on planning this funeral and making it the best that you can and what they would have loved, and then it stops. What do I do now? You can go pick out your outfit, you can go pick the flowers, all of that, and then nothing. And for me, it was the summer holidays of school, and I went, well, what do I do with myself now? Am I allowed to have fun? There isn't a rule book for what happens. So I think that's a big sudden element for me, because I don't think it's just sudden death. I think it's lots of sudden little moments.
I got a lot of little suddens in like remembering or like reminding myself that like my dad wasn't alive anymore. So I think when it happened so suddenly for a long time, you're like, no, I'll go home and my dad's there. Or like once I remember like sitting and working and hearing the key in the front door, and I was like, oh, dad's back from work. And I was like, no, Zunera, he's not alive. And so like there's a lot of moments where you just have to like check yourself and be like, they're not alive, they're not alive. And I think every time that happens, it feels like a little sudden. But to me, it was like a huge sudden, like you're remembering every single time that they're not alive. And I think that happens for a very long time. Like I think even like a year on, I would think to myself, oh, like I just had a really good day, I'll go tell my dad. Or like when I got my offer to study at Cambridge, my first thought was I need to tell my dad. And I was like, actually, can't do that. So there's a lot of stuff like that, I think.
Yeah, no, I find like first thing in the morning, and I especially kind of in those first few weeks, and having to remember, that's probably up there and one of the worst feelings for me.
I've had dreams where like I've interacted with my dad and he's definitely alive in the dreams. And then I remember this one distinct one where it was so weird. I had a dream that he faked his death to escape like the FBI. And then like I shot out of bed and I ran into his room and I was like, Dad. And I was like, oh, Dad is not there. So it's definitely moments like that that feel like the death has just hit you all over again, but 1,000 times stronger.
Yeah, I think dreams are a big one. I've definitely had them, and I find it quite strange as well when it's definitely my dad, but not acting like my dad. And then it's really confusing, and then you wake up all disorientated. And then, oh, would you look at that, still not there.
with the sudden death, I think this is quite unique to me, but because again, I love studying. When my dad first died, my one goal was how did he die from a science point of view? I felt like I couldn't grieve until I knew scientifically the processes in his body that meant that he had to die. And so for a long time I was like, nah, he didn't die, because scientifically I don't know how it happened, so he's technically still alive. And then my first year of doing medicine, so currently, when I started learning physiology and things like biochemistry, I started to understand on like a molecular level how even though it was a sudden death, so like a heart attack, it actually wasn't. It was a long time coming, and I just like, you can't see it, so then it feels sudden. And then I had this huge mismatch about, well, a heart attack takes quite a long time to develop. Also, he died in like 2 days. And then I also think like understanding that like biological process for me, I think for me it was helpful. I think for a lot of people it wouldn't be, but because I love medicine, it helped me like connect more to his death. Because I feel like the one thing about being sudden as well is that it sounds weird and kind of bad, but I feel like I couldn't connect to him dying. It just like happened and I just saw it. But yeah, I think that's helped. Sometimes it's still quite hard to hear because it's quite like a jigsaw puzzle. It's like, well, that body system shut down and that had this consequence, and it means that whenever I like talk to my supervisors, I ask a lot of questions about how my dad could have died. And I think it helps me have like a less emotional aspect on it to like become a detective almost and figure it out, which I'm not done yet, but I will be soon.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know. That felt like very strangely specific to me, but
yeah, that I don't think I had. I think I was actually quite the opposite. I didn't want to know.
yeah.
I used to be a St. John ambulance cadet, and I remember heart attacks coming up. And he was going around the room asking how each person thought it felt to have a heart attack. And I ran. Because I didn't want to hear people speculate on what they thought it would feel like. I didn't even want to think about that. There's a part of me that just completely shuts down when it comes to those kind of things, because I don't want to think about my dad going through that. And I still don't. 7 years on, obviously know how heart attacks work and all of that, but I was never looking for the ins and outs and the why. I think I had slightly more abstract whys. Things like, why didn't you call an ambulance?
Yeah.
Things like that for me, that eat me up. And those, I don't know about you, but probably those regrets.
Yeah.
Why didn't I hug you that little bit longer? It's just those, what if I had done that and something would have changed?
Yeah, I think that's like the what ifs are quite big for sudden deaths. I think it's like, because it was so sudden, anything could have stopped it. And I think it's like weird now that I'm training to be a medic. I think sometimes I feel quite guilty that I'm going to save other people's lives, but the one person who is like most important to me, I couldn't save his life. And I think that's going to like be a little thing on my shoulder for the rest of my life. Like the heart attack, when I like the feeling of how it felt, I had quite a similar experience when I was in school. We had like a first aid crash course and they were like, let's do CPR. And I was like, absolutely not. And I just ran out.
You.
Yeah.
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 And I think for anyone listening, when you're in those situations, feel free to run. Feel free to say no, because it is not worth putting yourself in that situation at all. Obviously, if you feel comfortable, then go ahead. But definitely from what it sounds like our experiences, we it's almost like a fight or flight again, and you just like run away.
There are definitely like little things that can trigger you, which take that as like, it's not just you being quote unquote weak or not being able to handle it. It's just, it was hard and it still is hard.
If you know that something's coming up and you feel in a place to put arrangements in, I think it's important not to be scared to put boundaries in place for yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's with any loss. That's definitely not with sudden loss. Whether you're coming up to, say, a birthday or an anniversary, having boundaries in place. I've always advocated for, I think I said it last time, but I think it's always really important.
Yeah.
Because it's not worth your own mental health and your own feelings to please other people.
Sometimes when I think about things like getting married or like going to uni, I would get like quite jealous of other people, of my friends, and it felt awful and I would hate it. But it was like this deep, festering, awful jealousy where I was like, oh, well, your dad got to see you go to uni and your dad will get to see your children and walk you down the aisle. And I hate it. But I think, like, again, for everyone who's listening, I think it's so normal. And I think if you didn't feel that way, I'd be so worried. I think it's normal to just, you feel like you're missing out on something that you deserve, and you do deserve it.
Yeah, like, there's always a longing for what other people have, and when it's something as big as a parent, I think it can apply to so many different scenarios, whether you had a good relationship with them or not. There's always going to be someone else that has what you want. So I absolutely agree. There's always that jealousy, or even them just getting a text or a phone call from their dad, and you're like, well,
Must be nice.
Yeah, I wish that could happen to me, because the reality is it's never going to happen again.
Yeah.
And that hits really deep.
Whenever my friends are like, oh, I have to go call my dad, or like, I've had a hard day, I'm going to call my dad, I'm always like, okay. I don't show it ever because I am, below all this jealousy, I am happy because no one deserves to go through the pain of like losing someone.
It's not a willingness for other people to be in the same position.
One thing I did once, I was just so upset that I couldn't call my dad that I actually I did call him and I left a voicemail. And I think that helped me quite a lot, because even though I didn't hear him say anything back, because like we've kept my dad's old sim running, so I was like, something is hearing me. My dad, I know that like, I think people say that, oh well, they can like hear what's in your heart, and I'm like, okay. Sometimes you just want the material stuff, I think. And so sometimes when I like send him a message or I leave him a voicemail, that's something more physical that I can like comfort myself with, I think. I'm not sure if it's the same for you, but
yeah, I would do that, but I don't know if his phone number is now someone else's or something
that's so
like
true.
that. So I've never done it, but I have written letters and Father's Day cards and birthday cards, and I keep them in my memory box. To me, that's kind of my way of getting the things out that I want to say. But I remember having voicemails from him, and I remember there was one that said, "I'm just on my way home. I'm going to be about 10 minutes." And I would listen to it on repeat, almost willing it to come true. Obviously, it never did. I've lost them now. Through changing phones, they obviously didn't save. And that was really heartbreaking.
Yeah, I can imagine. Any video that I have of him, I've like saved on like 7 devices. I think
it's worth it.
You just want to hold on to everything you can, I think.
Yeah, I don't have many videos now that have his voice. Like, I can't picture it in my head anymore.
Same.
I can't hear it. That's something that no one really talks about.
Yeah, I don't think it's talked about enough. I think I've only got 2 videos of my dad talking. We didn't have that many pictures of him, but one of them, he's like congratulating me on my GCSEs, which whenever I do well in like, I don't know, an essay, I always like play it back to myself and I'm like, you've done a good job, Zunera, your dad's proud of you. And then I've got one where he's like helping my little cousin walk, and he's saying like here, 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 and like, to me sometimes when I hear him saying here, I think it means like I'm here with you. I quite like that, and I think again, holding on to anything you can is what grief is about, to be honest.
Yeah, because often that's all you can do.
Yeah.
We've got to muddle through somehow.
I think the quote, what is it? Grief is love persevering, or like, what is grief but love persevering? That's like
Yeah.
one of my favorite quotes about grief. I think whenever I think to myself, well, he's going to miss out on this, or, you know, I wish you could see me right now, I think because I think of my dad every day, I know that I love him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know through every single milestone, whether it be a tiny one or a massive one, that they would be so proud of us. And that I think if it was from their perspective, they would have given anything to be there for those things.
Yeah. For me, sudden death brought up so much anger. I was angry for ages. I'm still angry. I'm like, I needed a warning. I think that's what I'm angry about, is all I needed was some kind of like time traveler to tell me, listen, kid, you've got like 3 days left. Use them wisely. Or I'm angry that like the world keeps going when like 1 minute they're alive and the next they're dead. And it's like everyone else is moving on, and it's like, actually, no, like this big monumental thing that's just happened. My world has entirely collapsed and you've just moved on.
I definitely felt a lot of anger around all sorts of things. I think letting go of that was a massive step for me. So, an outlet that I use for those big emotions is playing music. I've been a pianist since I was about 4, 4 or 5, and my dad used to come in and lie down on kind of the sofa thing that we have in the room with the piano, and I'd just have my little light on and I'd play to him, and he absolutely loved it. And I find that I can be very expressive through piano or guitar and that kind of thing, because I find myself really connected to him, but I can also get out every single emotion that I want to while I'm doing that. And I think the same with listening to music as well. That's often a really good one. I don't know if you've got kind of that grief song that will always hit you, and sometimes when you need to cry, it's a good one to put on, because you'll always know that you can get those feelings out.
Yeah.
Mine's "Leave a Light On" by Tom Walker.
That is so cute.
Seen him live twice and have cried twice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if you have similar or other outlets.
I think, yeah, mine is still messaging my dad. I always message if there's like a big thing. So like I messaged before every single A-level exam and I was like, I'm completely screwed for this exam. Please, please, please help me. Or like when I started uni, I said, hey dad, we're going off to uni now. So I think I found that quite helpful because I like to keep him updated. Or like before my race yesterday, I told my stroke seat, give me a second, I need to talk to my dad so we can win the race. And so I just close my eyes and like I talk to him and I try and picture his face, which I think gets harder. But I try and imagine what he would say to me. And although I can't hear his voice, I know the advice that he would give because he's always like quite calm and collected. So I think for me, it's always talking to him, or like if I find something hard, I'll be like, Dad, I'm finding this hard, just in my head. But I think listening to music, I definitely have a grief playlist. And I always listen to it before like a big hurdle that I need to overcome. I think my favorite song is Love Dad. I'm not sure if anyone's heard it. But I think it matches what my dad's like ideology about the world. Like, you know, there are bigger things in the world that you should chase.
Yeah.
That helps me like get into the zone and bring myself out of the grief a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think along those lines, I always like to think about my dad's morals and how I can live my life in a similar way. He'd always tell me a Marcus Aurelius quote, to look upon the world with a kindly eye. And it's very simple that actually when you're going through grief, it's quite a nice one to remember.
Yeah.
That even though you feel so wronged, those feelings aren't going to last forever, and to try and find the kindness and the good in the world that you can.
Yeah.
I think it does help you through. It can be difficult. It can be so difficult. There are days and weeks and months where I can go and I'm looking and I can't find anything. And then it always comes back to grief in waves, and it can go up and down. Thank you very much for having this conversation. I've definitely learnt a lot from you. There's some really insightful things that I think I'll take away and use daily. I really, really have enjoyed myself. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I've learned so much. And also, talking to someone who's a bit further in their grief journey, it's been very reassuring, because the grief might not feel like it ends, but you keep going. And I think that's really reassuring to see. And it's been really lovely. Yeah, it's been so lovely hearing your story. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for listening to the Bereavement podcast. We hope that you tune in again.
This podcast is brought to you by Talk Grief, powered by Winston's Wish, the UK's first children and young people's bereavement charity.
Listen to young people from different backgrounds have honest conversations about their grief and experiences.
You might hear us laugh, cry, and everything in between.
We hope that these conversations give you the confidence to talk about your own grief. If you're grieving and over the age of 13, this podcast is suitable for you, and we hope it helps you feel less alone.
From teenagers to young adults, students to young professionals, we're all different, but we've all got grief in common. Thank you.